This program of dismissing conspiracy theories, it has its place there in dismissing the ridiculous ones. But what happens with it is that it ends up overreaching its proper place, and it ends up dismissing all notion of conspiracy. And this means that it potentially dismisses things that we should be paying attention to, and dismisses actual legitimate conspiratorial behavior that is possibly happening in the world. And so just to dismiss it all by default is a really dumb way of processing the world. And so what I would like to do in this video is to outline where that particular program belongs and where it doesn't belong. And so ideally to possibly help people to constrain it. One primary thing that I want to invoke at the start here is the idea of the bell curve of conspiratorial thinking. And so you can imagine a standard bell curve where in the middle you have all of the majority of the population who tend to not really think about conspiracies at all, or the people who dismiss them and ridicule the idea. And at the lower end, you've got all of the nonsense. So this is where you've got the people who don't really know how to think. And they're the people who might fall into ridiculous beliefs, let's say flat earth, for example. I tend to not be too dismissive of any perspective because I am somebody who always likes to keep a bit of a caveat there of I don't know for sure. What I do know is that to maintain the perspective of flat earth, they tend to need to dismiss a whole lot of physics. And when you're dismissing the very beauty of the universe itself and the way that the cosmos dance and just all of the mathematics and the incredible beauty of the whole system that we know from physics and astrophysics, etc., then I'm fairly certain that your worldview is flawed. Let's just assume flat earth is down in that lower end of the bell curve. This is the bucket where all conspiracy theories tend to get thrown. They get thrown in with flat earth, they get thrown in with lizard people and fucking God knows what else. But this is where this idea of the bell curve, I think, is incredibly useful. So you think about, you go to that upper end. So you move past the nonsense, you move past the majority of people, and then you get into this other small group of people. And so I think that this is where there are people who know how to think and they know how to analyze things, and they're actually looking for patterns in what we can see that point towards things going on that are beneath the surface. I think that this is where there's a lot of injustice as far as lumping everyone in this category into the other category, because they are vastly different categories, even though they're dealing with the same sort of area. And what these people actually are doing is they're attempting to error correct our society. So from a software analogy, you can imagine that they're somewhat like virus detecting software, where they're looking out for malignant things, malignant code that's running out in the societal structure, and they're trying to point it out and say, this over here doesn't make sense. Perhaps we should pay attention to this. But this notion of just simply dismissing any conspiracy theorist type thinking, it's obviously aligned with anybody who wants to act conspiratorially. And I think that this is a very logical and sensible thing to keep in your mind when you're trying to delineate what is nonsense and what might have validity to it. There's a fairly well agreed upon figure of the percentage of the population who are psychopaths, and that's about 1% of the population. And when you take a global population of 8 billion, and then let's just get rid of a quarter of it. Let's say there's 2 billion people, too young, too old, whatever. But then you take 1% of 6 billion people, and that's 60 million psychopaths out in the world running around being psychopathic. And the thing about a psychopathic mindset is that it naturally inclines you to climb hierarchical ladders, because you're more interested in making it difficult for other people and sabotaging other people and just doing whatever you can to get yourself ahead. High level positions naturally attract more psychopathic people, and more psychopathic people do better at getting into them. And this is something that's also very important to keep in mind, that those in the most powerful positions can be more psychopathic than your average person. Not all of them, but some of them undoubtedly are. And this is not an out there idea. I think it's something that anybody, if they take 2 seconds to think about it, would agree with. And so this is where I think the idea of conspiracy needs to be kept on the table, and it needs to be kept as a concept that we actually use instead of just throwing in the bin with a bunch of nonsense.